On the verge of the Roman Empire's collapse, a guy named Capella realized what was bound to be lost and decided to combine the 7 main subjects being taught at the time into one book. He called it the 7 Liberal Arts. This became the only knowledge for 700 years to come after the fall of the Roman Empire. Virtually all knowledge was lost. At the same time, another guy turned priest named Augustine said that the only thing worth worrying about was the hereafter. How would architecture and science be beneficial after you're dead? Western Europe delved into an escapist period. Life for the common man became literally barbaric after the sophistication of Rome. People did not go from town to town. In fact, there were no real towns at this time. They carved out meaningless lives based solely around basic survival. The only people who could read or write, who had any knowledge whatsoever, were priests and monks. But because of Augustine, they did not use that knowledge for higher or logical thinking. Instead of asking why something is red, they simply said it's red to symbolize the blood of Jesus. Or if something is painful, such as thorns on a rose, it was Satan's tries to pull us from God. Everything the monks knew was 700 years old. By 700 AD, there was virtually no intellectual life in Western Europe. Enter Charlemagne in 768. Charlemagne governed a pitiful place and decided to make it better by standardizing reading and writing and expanding it further than the priests. This would make ruling his kingdom easier because understanding would be universal. He used Capella's 7 liberal arts to do this, but knowledge was not particularly expanding as people learned to read and write. Charlemagne died in 814, and life became briefly horrid again as the Vikings invaded Western Europe. After the Vikings eventually left, people were a bit better off because of Charlemagne. They were still living in mud houses, but they were beginning to gather socially. Clearings, once used as a safe spot to meet to escape the Vikings, saw opportunities to entertain others, trade goods, and eat outside their homes. Bologna slowly grew to be a rapid trade town by 1050, but life was getting too good too fast. Their philosophy was, let it happen. But no one was really in charge. The emperor was always off fighting for more land, the council were mere puppets, there was the church, and then there was the merchants who never looked further than what their wallets would do for them. On top of no one being in charge, there was no real legal system. In 1076, a monk teaching the 7 liberal arts in Bologna stumbled upon a book of Roman law, but it was too sophisticated for anyone to understand. If you can't understand a law, how can you enforce it? So he sat down and invented a thing called glossing. He took confusing words and phrases and explained it in the margins, basically dumbing it down. This process of glossing only worked for laws because they did not have any real knowledge of any other subject. In other news, the church hired mercenaries to free Spain from the clutches of the evil Arabs who had already been living in Spain for close to 300 years by this time. The true motive for this crusade was to give these fighters a place to plunder that was well outside their homes and their empire. These mercenaries, sent by the Christian church, were mainly Arabs, or Christians who had Arab parents or relatives. The Christian crusades at this time were merely propaganda. When the Christians took over these Arab towns, they realized they were really cities. While Western Europe was still living in stick houses during the Dark Ages, Spanish Arabs had pavement, street lighting, 300 public baths, parks, palaces, 100,000 houses, hydraulics for fountains, a population of 1 million, and a mosque bigger than all other mosques in the world except for Mecca. While Western Europe was still scratching on animal skins, Spanish Arabs had paper for 200 years already. The largest library in the city held 440,000 books, and the city had 69 other libraries as well. Spanish Arabs gave Western Europe many cultural practices that are still used today. They gave us rhyming poetry, rhythmic instrumental music, dressing for the seasons, table settings, table manners, different courses at meals, and desserts after meals. Then there was the Fall of Toledo, which wasn't so much of a fall but more of a handover. The sovereign of Toledo felt unsafe and decided to give the Christians the city of Toledo in exchange for a safer position. When Toledo was handed over, every Christian scholar in Western Europe flocked to the city. They had found a gold mine of libraries, stuffed with books of sciences that were virtually light years ahead of their time. They realized that the Arabs had translated ancient Greek works of literature that had been put aside by Western Europe for millennia. Only now did Christian Western Europe realize the civilization they had destroyed by conquering the Spanish Arabs. Over the next 150 years of translating these books from Arabic to Spanish to Latin for the rest of Western Europe, they rediscovered sciences long forgotten. These included math, astronomy, biology, geometry, medicine, anatomy, physics, chemistry, zoology, optics, botany, pharmacology, meteorology, architecture, philosophy, and engineering. These sciences all baffled and dumbfounded Western Europe until Aristotle put it all together using logical thinking. Instead of just accepting your skin is wet, Aristotle said to ask why. Skin is wet. Wet comes from holes, so therefore wet skin has holes, or now we call them pores. Thanks to Spanish Arabs, intellectual life in Western Europe was reborn.